When we have shame and judgment, it's like putting a 50-pound weight on top of the hood. So we can't even get under the hood if we can't open it. And that's what shame and judgment does, is it just keeps a lid on everything.
Hello, and welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Counseling. We are in Iowa. And just want to mention our new Patreon program. Now, when we're talking on this podcast, we're not talking necessarily to therapists and counselors. Really, the people we want listening to us every week are the people who are on the fence about counseling, or maybe people who are in counseling, but they're like, I don't know if this is even working for me right now, right? You're on the fence about staying in counseling. If that's you, then you're the person that we're really mainly talking to here on the podcast. The person who's like, I think maybe counseling would be helpful for me, but gosh, I just don't know. Okay. But if you are a therapist, a mental health therapist, which I know a lot of mental health therapists do still listen to the podcast, if you are one, please go ahead and check out our Patreon. You can find us at patreon.com/heart and solutions. And we have play therapy trainings there. We have the live webinar trainings, but we also have the recorded trainings that are self-paced. You can take them at 2:00 in the morning. If you're up and you go, I might as well get some CEUs in, go ahead and check out the Patreon as well.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am the Vice President at Heart and Solutions in charge of our behavioral health department. So I supervise the program where we go in home and work with children ages 4 through 18 on different behavioral skills. And we can see them as well in school or in office or through telehealth as well. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Yeah, so we post on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Central Time. So batch up your laundry or whatever task you hate doing. And don't worry about laundry on Thursday nights, putting that away. Don't worry about it. Do that on Sunday nights. Putting away laundry is something we should only have to think about once a week. So go ahead and batch up your laundry or do your meal prep on Sunday nights, 5 p.m. Central. You can listen to our episode from that week, and that gives you that entire week to get scheduled with your counselor, to call and find a counselor, or to reach out to our guest from that week or the resources that we have shared that week. So today we have a guest from New Mexico, but she serves clients across the country. So if you're in New Mexico or you're not in New Mexico, you can still get in touch with her. So we've got Jane Pilger on the show today. Welcome, Jane. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and just really looking forward to this conversation today.
Wonderful. So Jane is a coach that helps people who are struggling with trusting themselves when it comes to food, eating behaviors, their body, movement, and allows for people to start to trust themselves and trust that process when it comes to different types of food behaviors or food challenges. So we're very excited to have you here with us, Jane. Now, binge eating disorder is fairly new in terms of the DSM-5. So when I was in grad school, we didn't have binge eating disorder. I didn't know that that was a thing. And then it kind of got snuck into the DSM, and not as many people as I thought were really talking about it. So tell us a little bit about what you do in your coaching practice and how you help people find their relationship with themselves, their bodies, and with food and eating.
Yeah, definitely. So, it's interesting to kind of like look at even specifically the DSM-5. I mean, I think when I was going through therapy, I was probably, I think originally kind of diagnosed as EDNOS, right? Eating disorder, what was the, and not otherwise specified was kind of technically at the very time when I was diagnosed, that's kind of was the category that I fit in. But I think for me, some people really want to know, kind of go to the DSM or go to the exact diagnosis or the definition. And to me, it's really more about just like, how am I feeling? Am I feeling out of control around food? And I think for me, that's the person that I really just have a huge heart to help, is the person who just feels out of control around food and feels like food is really just taking up so much of their mental space as well as so much of their physical space as well. And I have been on this journey myself, dealing with binge eating as well as, I would say, restrictive eating. I really have had several different disordered eating patterns and behaviors kind of over that 25 plus years. And I feel like I'm really on the other side of it. Not that it's like, oh, everything's rainbows and daisies, and I don't ever have any concerns with food or my body again, because I mean, I'm a woman living, in this world. So I think, that just kind of comes with the territory. But I just know how challenging it is. And, so what I do is really just use what I have learned over the years in my own journey, as well as in my journey in working with other people, helping other people, and kind of really putting everything together that I have amassed all of that experience in, kind of just creating my own just kind of method and way of working with people that really is different. It's just different than what I experienced in traditional. I was in 2 different rounds of intensive outpatient therapy at a local eating disorders treatment center. So, I've done that. I've done, of course, I've read all the books. I've done, the online programs. And then I've also learned things in other areas and through other practitioners. So for me, it's kind of like bringing all of the different layers together into what I do, into my coaching practice, and how I help other women who are, kind of just going through that same struggle.
Awesome. So it sounds like you yourself originally were diagnosed with it, and that's how you came to help other people. How did you realize that you potentially had a problem with food, or how did people know that they even potentially have binge eating disorder?
So my very first binge was my first semester in college. And I remember I had received a care package from home. And it was a box full of like little like miniature candy. And I don't really remember the binge itself, but what I remember is the after. And I remember sitting there with this box, empty box, and just wrappers all around me, empty wrappers all around me. And I had eaten all of the candy in the box. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what have I just done? And I felt very broken, and like something was very wrong with me. But I had so much shame that I just really, like, I did not want to talk about it. I did not want anybody to know. And it was years, I would say, before I actually told anybody. So I still had these behaviors. I, on the outside, was very, successful. I apparently had it all together, and I really didn't want anybody to know that I was doing this terrible thing. And I kept trying to kind of make up for it, right? So I would either diet, like stop, try to eat. I was kind of eating like either like cottage cheese and lean cuisine, or I was binging. Um, Fortunately, I tried other forms. I tried throwing up. Fortunately, my body just didn't do that very well. And I'm so grateful for that, or I 1000% would have been bulimic. I tried laxatives once and I was like, ooh, we're not doing that again. And so, for me, it really, there was so much going on, but I had so much shame. And so it was, I think it was probably, so I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to talk to anybody about it because I felt so broken and like something was wrong with me. And I think it was probably, I was trying to remember when I first saw somebody specifically for the eating behaviors. And I think it was after I had graduated from college. So I went through several years of college with this behavior, and I was on antidepressants. So I know I was seeing a psychiatrist at the time, to kind of for my meds, but I really wasn't telling anybody what I was doing with food. And then after I graduated from college, I moved in with I had met who is now my husband. When we first got together, everything was amazing. And then I started binging again. And then we got engaged. And then I was able to kind of maintain it. And then we got married. And we had been married for about a year and things were just getting way worse. And I finally decided, okay, I need to see somebody about this. Like, this is a problem. This is impacting my life. And I'm clearly not able to solve this on my own, but I certainly don't want to tell anybody else. And so I went to see an eating disorder specialist, and it was very challenging. It was challenging to talk about it. And she convinced me very lovingly, and it probably took a while to open up and to tell other people about what was happening and about my struggles. And that process itself was also huge for me and very challenging. I mean, I was already married, and I was just convinced my husband would not love me if he knew this terrible, horrible thing that I did in secret. I often, by that point in college, I lived by myself. So I just binged in my apartment. It was very easy to do. Once we were living together, I binged in my car. It's primarily what I would do. And I would just drive around and I would eat and I would drive, from place to place and only buy a few things. And so nobody would know that I was going to eat all the food. So I would just buy just enough things to get to the next place. And then I would get there and I would throw it away, or I would have a bag. At one of the places, I would get a bag. So then I could have all of my trash and put it in a bag. And then I would throw it away at a gas station before I got home. So just kind of, really hiding all of the evidence. And so telling my husband was so challenging. I remember I could not even look at him. I laid on the bed just crying. I had my arm, my elbow kind of over my eyes because I just couldn't even look at him. I was just so sure that he wouldn't love me. And he was so kind and so loving and so compassionate. And really, that being able to tell people and the response that I got from them was really very helpful kind of in my whole journey.
Yeah. I mean, telling people takes the power of that shame away. That shame, the best friend of shame is secrecy, is darkness. And one of the, when we externalize our shame and we can see that as something outside of ourselves, we can see that, oh yeah, that shame wants me to feel isolated. That's how that shame grows. And so that voice that we hear in our head, it's not always coming from us. It's coming from shame saying nobody will love you if they know. You better make up for these binges in some way so that people won't know by seeing it on your body. And so you talked about, I think a lot of times people think about bulimia and they think about throwing up, and that is a challenge because it can minimize some of these other patterns of eating that are very, very stressful to us, because we can go, if we do a comparison, we go, well, at least I'm not throwing up, right? But I might be exercising 4 hours a day in order to make up for that, right? Exercise bulimia doesn't always get talked about, or restricting, where, okay, I'm going to have a binge on Saturday, and this gets normalized into our culture, into cheat days, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
I'm going to have Saturday's my cheat day, and then the rest of the week I'm going to eat cottage cheese and lean cuisines.
Yes.
And it's a way that we say, well, I think I can control it, or I want so badly to control it. And I feel like I can't. You talked about that power of help, that powerless feeling and that helpless feeling, and that feeling of my eating is out of my control, and I want so badly to control it that I'm putting these practices in place, right? These cheat days or these binge days, and then I'm going to be really good. We moralize it too, right? And so we say I'm going to be really good these days because I've been really bad these days. And it all comes down to that. I want to control this thing that is uncontrollable. I can't control it, but I want to control it. And you said you called it a terrible, horrible thing, and it reminds me of Matthew Perry's new book, right? It's food and addiction to food and challenges with food behaviors and that feeling of out of control. It is again, I think just minimized so much in our society. It causes suffering to the person experiencing it. The symptomology is internal. And so if I'm addicted to heroin, I'm going to cause problems for people around me, right? Like I'm causing problems for myself too, but other people are experiencing problems because of that addiction. If I've got an addiction to food, I'm causing problems to myself. I'm causing problems to my own health, to my own well-being, to my own anxiety and feelings of being out of control. And so it gets normalized. It doesn't get as talked about. And it also feels like, well, there are worse things, right? I could be out of control with. I could be out of control with alcohol, and I'm not. I could be out of control with meth, and I'm not, right? It's cupcakes. And there's such an innocence to food in our culture that I think that makes it normalized by society, and then drives that shame further, because why do I feel out of control and upset and have depression and have anxiety about cupcakes? It doesn't make sense to us as we're experiencing it. And so I think what you're talking about in terms of that shame, it's like, gosh, I remember I felt silly, right? As that being my secret. Like, who has a secret like that? Right. And that creates more and more shame, I think, even more so than other addictions, because they seem like things that we should be able to handle. Other people can handle pizza just fine. So it feels like things that we should be able to. And when we can't, we feel like it's because of us. We feel like it's some deficiency in ourselves. And just continues that cycle. And so I love your story about bringing it to the light and telling people, because our biggest fear, the thing that we're wired to think is going to kill us, is disconnection and rejection from other people. And so if my husband doesn't love me anymore because he knows about the McDonald's wrappers in my car, and not only the McDonald's wrappers, but the Taco Bell wrappers and the Wendy's wrappers, right? If you go through archaeology wise, it's layer upon layer upon layer. And if you were to see that, or if for children and adolescents, gosh, if my parents were to see that, right, or if my friends were to see that, then that brings that fear of disconnection and rejection. And we're wired to believe that that will kill us. And the truth is, it won't kill us. Shame will kill us.
Yeah. I remember of course, Brene Brown wasn't around. Her research wasn't out in the world when I was going through all of this, but I remember once I was introduced to Brene Brown and I started reading all of her work and her research on shame, it was just like, oh, wow, yes, this makes so much sense. And it's like what you were just saying is like it doesn't make sense what we're doing. It's like, I don't understand. I don't understand why I'm doing this. There must be something wrong with me. I must be broken, which is the hallmark of shame, right? Thinking that we are broken, that there is something deeply wrong or flawed in us is that shame. And so one of the things that I do, I really have, in my time and over my work, I've identified really 8 reasons why people binge. And then each reason has a corresponding solution. And the number one reason is shame and judgment. It's shame and judgment over the behavior. And when we're in shame and judgment, we can't access anything else because we are, we're either hiding or, we've kind of put this extra layer on ourselves about it. So, like, I kind of like to look at the binge is like it's a symptom. So, the binge is like the light coming on the dashboard. It's like check engine light. Something is going on under the hood. And so, this is the light to let you know we need to look under the hood to see what's going on. But so many people, they see the light and they're like, oh, that's the problem. The problem is the light is coming on. So I need to look at the light and fix the light, which is like, okay, what am I getting? What am I eating? When am I eating? How much? Like all of that is like really just trying to like fix the light. Whereas I say, let's look under the hood and see what's causing this light to come on in the first place. But with shame and judgment, when we have shame and judgment, it's like putting a 50-pound weight on top of the hood. So we can't even get under the hood if we can't open it. And that's what shame and judgment does, is it just keeps a lid on everything. So the solution to shame and judgment is understanding why, like why it makes sense. So that's one of the things I love to do, is just help people like, oh, that makes sense. It makes sense why I started in the first place. There are really, kind of a handful of reasons that I see that generally kind of cause the behavior to start. And then even understanding why it's still continuing, why it's still there. It's like if you can even just understand that, it goes from being this terrible, awful thing that I do, or I'm broken, to, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And now with this new and different perspective on the behavior, then I can see it in a different way. Now I can kind of work with it, work with myself, work with what's going on under the hood. I can kind of try to see what needs to be repaired. And then the light will go off on its own. We don't have to just look at the food and the behavior and the all of that, which is what we naturally want to do. It's actually, no, we got to get under the hood and be like, oh, the light came on because of this and this wire. Okay, let's go in here and fix the wire, look at the wire, make it fit better. Then that light just might go off.
I like that. So how did you get into coaching then, from starting from telling your husband about you having binge eating disorder to now that you're coaching people? How'd that journey take place?
Gosh, yeah. So I went through a couple of rounds of intensive outpatient therapy here at a local eating disorders treatment center, which was very powerful, and I learned a lot. Then I think I had this like, if I can figure this out, I really want to help other people. Just knowing the challenges and everything that I went through, I really wanted to kind of, I wanted there to be purpose behind the pain and the struggle. And I ended up finding through a whole series of events, I ended up finding a life coach, and decided, you know what, I'm going to go get certified, whether it's just for me and my own personal journey, or whether I end up doing this to help other people, we'll kind of see. So I got certified as a life coach back in 2015. And I really knew that I wanted to help people with binging, but I was still on the path. I was still on the journey. There was just more that I needed to learn. And as I was wanting to kind of like go out there and build my business, the behaviors they started coming back. And so then I started doing some more. I'm just like constant learner, really learning more. What else is going on? There must be some pieces of the puzzle missing, kind of like looking under the hood. And then I came to really learn more about the nervous system, I came to learn more about just the way that we're wired, that creation of safety. I really started working on the concept of safety and trust, building both safety with myself, safety in my body, trust with myself, all through the lens of the nervous system. Like I really realized, wow, my nervous system is really pretty dysregulated. I actually kind of live in that fight or flight place. And then I kind of, once it gets to be too much, then I end up using food to kind of bring that down. And so once I was able to kind of start to see, oh, yes, okay, I see. That makes sense. Ah, yes. Really just making sense of the times it was still happening and using that as instead of, I think at that point had learned the skill of not shaming and judging myself for it. So then when it did happen, I could kind of go into, oh, let's just pop the hood and see what happened, kind of looking underneath and seeing that. And then being able to just kind of like put all of that together was like, oh, got it. And so I've been really since I got certified in 2015, I have been helping people with binge eating, but really just I would say it's been about a year now that I was decided, you know what, I'm going all in on this. This is what I want to do with my life. It is such a passion for me, and I feel like I'm really at this place now where it's like, yes, I get it. Those pieces are there, and I absolutely can help with this situation. And so, yeah, so I've been doing this full time for a year now. I just started a podcast at the end of November called Binge Breakthrough, which has been just amazing. In that podcast, I go through all 8 reasons, the reasons why, the solutions, really just kind of working, trying to provide resources that I really wish I had when I was going through, kind of the journey myself.
Awesome. Podcast Binge Breakthrough.
Yeah.
And so we'd love to hear. I'm so curious about these 8 reasons. It reminds me of that. What was that show? 13 Reasons Why. This is 8 reasons why we binge eat. So what are these 8 reasons that we can hear about on your podcast and that you go through? I'm thinking in much more depth and very personalized with each of the clients that you work with. What are these 8 reasons and their
Yeah.
solutions?
Yeah. So reason number one, we talked about shame and judgment about the behavior. Because if we can't get past the shame and judgment, we can't even get under the hood. So, and the solution for that is just to understanding why, like why you started, why you haven't stopped yet. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is restriction. And whether that is physical restriction, like removing food groups or, restricting the time of day that you eat or the amount that you're eating. But there's also a restriction that I think a lot of people don't really understand or realize, and that's mental restriction. So mental restriction can be like just saying to yourself, like, don't eat too much. That's mental restriction. Or I'm not going to eat this again until, next year, or I'm not going to get this again. Like that type of thing can create that restricted feeling, even if you're not actually restricting the food itself. So the solution for that is to remove restrictions. Reason number three is nervous system dysregulation. And so the solution is just understanding your nervous system and then learning how to work with it. Reason number four is disconnection from the body. So many of us who have these kind of disordered eating behaviors or patterns, we use the food as a means to disconnect. So like for me, when I was younger, I never really learned how to deal with my emotions growing up. And when we had arguments in our family, we would all just leave. And I would go to my room and I would slam the door. And I came to realize through therapy that me binging was actually slamming the door on myself. And it was disconnecting, right? Just total, like, I also use the term, like, I would just use the food to turn the lights off on myself and my experience. So the solution there is to connect with your body, to learn how to connect with your body itself, the signals that it's giving you. Our bodies are always communicating with us. We've just taught ourselves over time not to listen. So that's solution number 4. Solution number 5 is it's a coping mechanism. I think this is one that a lot of people would recognize. We use food to cope. And so the solution to that is to, I call it expanding your emotional capacity. So your emotional capacity is your capacity or ability to be with any emotion. And it's a skill. So it's something that we can learn, we can grow, we can expand that capacity so that we are more able to be with those emotions rather than needing to cope with food, disconnect with the food. So that's number 5. Number 6, we talked about, which is control, this attempt to control. We're trying to control, in a lot of cases, we're trying to control our bodies, but we may even use it kind of in other ways. We kind of feel like it's one place we can have control. And it's so interesting because in that attempt to control, we actually can end up feeling out of control. And so the solution to that is to develop what I call two-way trust with your body. So the trust needs to go both ways in that I can trust my body to tell me when it's hungry, when it's had enough, what it needs, what kind of food it wants. I can trust my body to tell me all of that. And my body can also trust me that it's actually going to be fed on a regular basis. So for anybody who has the cycle of restrict and binge, sometimes the body doesn't know, like, are we going to do that thing again where you don't feed me and we go into starvation? Like, I'm not okay with that. So the body doesn't necessarily trust us because of the behaviors that we've done over time. And for those of us who've done it for a really long time, I know for me, I can skip a meal very, like, not on purpose, but because of other things going on. And that can kind of heighten my body. It's gotten much better now, but because my body is now more trusting that it is going to be fed. But it's like that trust really has to go two ways. The body has to know it's going to get fed on a consistent and regular basis. And we have to know that our body is going to tell us, give us all the signals around food, which is a process through connection and these other things where we develop that trust. So, and then reason number 7 is a habit. I mean, when you've done the same thing over and over, for anybody who does have these eating challenges, you can really think it happens very often for people in patterns, right? Oh, okay. It's either, maybe it's a day of the week, maybe it's a time of day, maybe it is associated with when you're in the car or when you're on your couch watching TV or when the kids go to bed, whatever that is. When you've done that repeatedly, you even think about the food you eat, we often go for the same foods. It does become a habit. And so some people only look at it as a habit. It's like, okay, I have to break the habit of, eating XYZ, like on my way home from work. And so then it's like the focus becomes the behavior itself and the food. And yes, it absolutely is a habit. But if we only look at it as a habit and we don't look at the other 7 reasons, this is why you can kind of have this temporary success. But if you're not looking at your nervous system and connecting with your body and your emotional capacity and restrictive, thoughts and behaviors, just looking at the habit isn't going to do it. So it's a very important component, but it's only like one of these reasons. The solution, breaking the habit. And so there are very definite things you can do with so much that we know around habits, but that only will work if we're working on all of these other solutions as well. And then the last reason is your internal narrative, your dialogue, the way you talk to yourself, inside your head. Like, what does that internal dialogue sound like? And so the solution is really changing it, becoming aware of what it sounds like in there, how you're talking to yourself. This kind of really does go hand in hand with shame and judgment, because the personal narrative that you have with yourself kind of can create the shame and judgment. Or if you can change it to be more compassionate, more curious, then that shame and judgment will kind of fall away as well. So those are the 8 reasons.
Interesting. So do you feel like most people have all 8 that they kind of have to work through? Is it like 1 or 2 that some people have, or how does that work?
I find what's actually really interesting is, as I talk to people, as I've been, really kind of talking about these 8 reasons, I would say most people resonate on some level with all of them.
Mhm.
And so I think there are, for sure, I think people can say, oh, yes, it's more this, but I can see myself in all of these, but oh, that emotional capacity thing, like that for sure is a thing for me. And I actually developed a quiz so that if anybody is kind of experiencing this, kind of feeling out of control around food, and they're really wondering why, why is it for me? I developed a quiz to really help you determine your number one reason. What is your number one reason why you binge? And then, and through that, so you get your answer, and then I give you 3 things that you can do right away to start working on those things, because the thing with binging is it's a process. So there's no quick fix. We are not flipping the switch and all of a sudden, tomorrow you're just never going to binge again. I really look at it as an unwinding, and it absolutely can be unwound for sure, but it's something that takes really time and understanding, and it's developing a new relationship with yourself and a new relationship with food. So it is a process for sure.
You've given 2 really great metaphors that that I really love. The car engine, the engine light being on metaphor, and shame being, I haven't heard this piece or gotten this mental image before of shame being that weight on the hood. So I think that is a beautiful analogy. And then when you described the binging, the time of the binging as turning the lights off and slamming the door on ourselves, it made me think about this, because that is, and you talked about safety and building safety in ourselves and building safety being with ourselves. And that place that the binging brings us to does feel like a safe place so often. And sometimes that feels like the only safe place to be. And then it's like, well, that's my real life. And then when I'm out here in the world, right, I have all these expectations, but when I'm in a binge, I can just be me. And so being able to bring those pieces of safety out into the world and being able to say, to build that same feeling of trust in the world. It's kind of like, gosh, there's a movie where the guy, he can't tell if he's dreaming because his dream life and his awake life are both so detailed, right? And it's kind of, so he can't tell which is real. When am I asleep? When am I awake? And so being able to bring that into our day to day, and have that trust be in ourselves instead of in that little room, that little dark closet, that feels safe, is a beautiful analogy. So I love that. And sometimes we have to even grieve that place that we used to go, because we don't go there anymore, or we go there but we use a different door, and the door that we were using, which is the food, or the restricting of the food, that door that we were using to get there, once we close that door and we don't need to go through that door anymore because we've got another way to get to that safety feeling, sometimes we have to grieve that door, and we have to grieve the loss of that path into that safety. So
one thing that happens too, that I notice that happens over time, is for sure there can be a grieving process, but I think as you start to kind of have more connection with yourself and more awareness, I think sometimes where the grief can come in is when you go to the behavior and it doesn't give you that same feeling or the safety that it used to. And so it's like, okay, I know there is still this need for comfort. There is still this need for safety. There is still this need for assurance or whatever. I was getting that need met through food. But as you kind of become aware and you start to really see, okay, it's not actually meeting that need anymore. So then it's kind of a matter of finding other things that will meet that need that actually will then not only in the moment, but then longer term will actually meet that. So there's kind of this process where it's like, okay, I want to go back to this thing that I know where my neural connections have been firing and wiring together for so many years. And then I do it and it's like, oh, that's not the experience that I used to get from it. And so then that can kind of become more, it's almost like that kind of almost even starts to like dim that light on the, or instead of 4 lights on the dashboard, now maybe we just have 3. And then the next time comes where when you do start really connecting with what are my needs? What was I looking for the food to do for me? Now I'm realizing it's not doing it for me. What is that need? What can I do to get those needs met in a different way that feels in that moment and also later is more connecting, honoring, nurturing to myself, because that becomes the goal, is the connection, the honoring, the nurturing instead of fixing, controlling. That's kind of where we start, is we're trying to fix, we're trying to control, and we're kind of trying to manipulate. And so we move from that to connection and nurturing and compassion and curiosity. It's naturally going to change how you show up with yourself. And then when you try to go back to those patterns, it's like, oh, well, that doesn't work anymore. So that's kind of, it's a really interesting way to kind of just watch the process unfold.
Interesting. So when you have that feeling then of like, okay, this isn't working anymore, I'm assuming you've had to come up with like some other coping skills or ways to feel in control then when that happens. So what are some things that you found that have worked for you or that you tell like your clients to do as well?
Yeah, I think one of I actually got this from a eating disorders therapist. One of the things that has been super powerful me in terms of needing comfort. We started talking about, what brought me a lot of comfort as a child. And I loved stuffed animals. I had a lot of stuffed animals. And so this was years ago now, I went to a Build-A-Bear workshop and I picked out a stuffed animal. I picked out a giraffe. And I stuffed her, to just the right level of stuffiness. I put, a little heart in her, and I named her Ginger. So Ginger the giraffe, and she is my companion. Right now, she lives in the closet. She has a very nice shelf in the closet. And when I need her, when I am needing some sort of comfort, like I have created this kind of safe kind of space where I will get her. I will wrap up with her. I will wrap up with a big warm blanket. If I need my husband to be there with me, I will let him know. Like, I just need like you to just like rub my back. Or sometimes I can do it just with myself and Ginger. And so she is really a very great source of comfort for me. And I just know she's there. And sometimes I need her and then I grab her, and other times like she's just on the shelf, just ready to be called upon. That has really been huge for me, because I have, kind of been this like very, okay, we're going to be adults and do the things and, succeed and whatever. And so giving myself kind of a place and a way to be a little more kind of vulnerable, be able to kind of be held in some of my, kind of weaker, where I'm feeling weaker, kind of emotionally or whatever. So that has been huge for me. The other thing that's been really helpful for me is guided meditations. Finding anything. I use Insight Timer personally, but over time, like just experimenting with different ones. There are ones that just either the person itself, what they're saying, finding something that just resonates so deeply that I can just know, like, oh, okay. And so I have, okay, when I'm feeling this way, this is the meditation that I listen to. And so then I kind of have those connection of, okay, I know I can kind of get my nervous system into this place by listening to these words or this, tone or whatever it is. So I would say those have been two really, really big things for me.
It's where we go for comfort. And as children, we have our primary attachment figure. And if that primary attachment is disrupted, in my case as a child, it was disrupted at a year old. And then it's okay, well, where do I go for comfort when I don't have that primary attachment? And usually, naturally, that primary attachment will shift over to an object of our affection. So that will shift over into a stuffed animal or a blanket or a body pillow, or something like that. And then that becomes kind of our touchstone, our place that we go for comfort. And there are very, very healthy places for us to go for comfort, our family, our friends, ourselves, quiet time and blankets and stuffed animals and pillows, and music. They're such healthy places to go for comfort. And then there are places that we go for comfort that then cause us more discomfort later. And so we have to go back to them again. And if we try to fill a bucket that has holes in it, we're just constantly filling that bucket. And every time we fill it, the holes get bigger. And so once we find that personalized place where, okay, I don't even have to fill a bucket anymore. There's just abundance of water, and I don't have to fill a bucket anymore. That's when we don't have to go to those other things for comfort, because we have a place that we can always go at any time. And so I loved your analogy of the, maybe 3 lights go on in the car instead of 4, right? Where it's just that continual process until we find that place, to go for comfort that works for us individually.
And I think it can be so powerful too to know, okay, I'm doing this for comfort. Like, especially with food, I think there can be this idea that it's like, I'm doing this to punish myself. I must be doing this to punish myself. I must be doing this because I hate myself. And I really don't believe that's true. I believe there is always a very good reason why our behaviors show up. They are trying to protect us in some way. Now, it doesn't always come out protective, but there's always really a very good reason for it. And it's not because, now sometimes there is shame and judgment that does end up kind of keeping us in the pattern. Absolutely, that happens. But there's always a very good reason why it makes sense. And so if we can even just see, like, oh, okay, I'm looking for this, I'm trying to have food or whatever it is kind of meet this need. I love your analogy of the bucket and the holes, right? I kind of think like food was never designed or meant to kind of do what we try to kind of force it to do, which is why it doesn't work, which is why we can sometimes just like feel like we can never get enough. And it's because that thing that we really, really need is not found in the food itself. But the intent behind it is so, there is really a very good reason, and it really is for a very protective way. So it's like, oh, if we can just figure out that reason, meet it in another need, like you said, where it's just this abundance of water, then we're not trying to take care of it with just the tool that is never going to do the job.
Awesome.
It's taking a hammer and trying to screw something into the wall with a hammer and going, I must be a terrible carpenter.
Yes.
I can't get this screw into the wall, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, awesome. Well, if you could give one suggestion then to somebody on the fence about starting counseling or starting coaching with you, what might that suggestion be?
I would say, what we were talking about earlier with shame, talking to somebody. If you have never talked with somebody about your struggles, whether they be struggles with food, struggles with, as humans, every single one of us has struggles. We all have things we would rather not talk to anybody about, that we would rather people not know that this is what is either what I'm thinking. So many of us have these thoughts in our heads and we think, oh my gosh, if anybody ever knew these sentences were running through my head, or if anybody ever knew what I did when nobody was watching, you're so normal. And if you can talk to somebody, find somebody to talk to who will meet you with compassion, who will help you understand why you make sense, help you understand that you are not broken. There is nothing wrong with you for having these thoughts or these behaviors that you would hate for anybody else to know. A counselor, a coach, just any sort of professional who does this on a regular basis is the perfect safe place for you to get those things just out of your mind. There is so much power in just speaking what is happening for you into the world to somebody who is able to meet you and help you understand just how you make sense. So much power in that. And if the first person that you try to talk to does not meet you in a way that feels resonant or feels comfortable to you, try somebody else, because there is a fit for you. Whether it is whoever it is, there is a fit for you, so that you don't have to keep all of this inside, because keeping it inside is what makes it grow. It makes it bigger. It makes it feel more insurmountable. And just being able to get it out to a person who is able to just listen and meet you is the absolute best thing you could ever do for yourself.
Absolutely. There's a mantra for counseling, and it says, I'm not telling on myself, I'm telling on my shame. And,
That's so
or
good.
I'm not telling on myself, I'm telling on my symptomology, right? And so I love what you're saying about share that, get it out into the light. That is the way that shame dies, the way to kill it is to shine a spotlight on it and share it with somebody else who
That's right.
understands.
I'm Jane Pilger, and I need a counselor.
Awesome. Me too. So does Chrissa. Some of the things you were talking about, that internal dialogue, that mental restriction, can be so beneficial. I would imagine that if somebody's working with you on coaching and they go through some of those things and there's some trauma that is getting in the way of getting through some of those steps, that counseling can absolutely come alongside, and they can do some EMDR to kind of reprocess or reprogram some of those things. So
Absolutely.
that is beautiful. So if you are looking to connect with Jane, you can go to www.janepilger.com, Pilger, Pilger. You can find her on Facebook and Instagram at Jane Pilger Coaching. And you can also listen to the Binge Breakthrough podcast. And that quiz to find your number one reason of the 8, is that on your website?
It is. Yes, it's on my website.
Perfect.
Yep.
So that sounds like a really, really great way for somebody to start getting involved with you and your program. Yeah. So if you are in Iowa and you're looking for mental health counseling or behavioral counseling, go ahead and give us a call at 800-531-4236.
And like Julie mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we post new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central. So save up your laundry or whatever task you hate doing that week and listen to us while you get that done, and we can help connect you with our guest for that week. And if you have any questions for us, you can reach us on our Facebook page at You Need a Counselor Podcast, our Instagram at You Need a Counselor Podcast. You can also send us a text or leave a voicemail, and that can be anonymous at our phone number at 515-650-3231. And then we also have a Patreon, like Julie mentioned at the beginning. So if you are interested in those play therapy trainings, you can look at that up at patreon.com/heartandsolutions. And we are on YouTube as well. I think we covered everything there. So I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you. Bye.
Bye.